Welcome back to another episode of our F1 22 My Team Career Mode, and this time we are heading to Saudi Arabia. Hopefully we can carry on our good form that we had in Bahrain. We actually managed to get some pretty decent points ourselves and teammate Button, so that should hopefully be quite nice. It looks like weather-wise we are dry throughout, so none of that to worry about. Progress history, we are sort of around the performance level of the Haas and AlphaTauri at the moment. It looks like the Alfa Romeo and the Alpine are that just little step ahead of us, and you can see in terms of engine wear. I mean, some people have been having issue with the ICE, although as of recording there's been a new update which is supposed to fix that, so we'll have to see. Anyway, we are into quali. Hopefully we can make it into Q2. I mean, that would be the ideal one, but as we start our flying lap we can see Daniel Ricciardo is out of the session pretty much straight away, and this is the McLaren in question. You see he's coming around that corner, clearly taking way too much speed and just slams it straight into the wall. So that is his session over pretty early, and you can see it manages to muck up the lap of that Alfa Romeo as well. Anyway, moving on from that crash, we just asked our engineer. I don't actually know his name, I need to find that out because obviously it used to be Jeff, but anyway, we asked him what our teammate has done, because obviously we skipped forward a little bit, and he's done a 1:30.0, so that's the sort of time we're looking for to match, to obviously hopefully get through Q2. I will say overall the car's just feeling a lot better on this track than it did in Bahrain. Bahrain, it was so twitchy coming out of the low speed corners. I mean, it helps that Jeddah doesn't really have that many low speed corners, so the sort of the way the downforce is generated on these cars very much is suited to a track like Jeddah. But we managed a 1:30.157, so that slots us right into 6th place, well, a little bit later on 8th place by the looks of it, after our teammate. And then we retire from the session, because I think that should get us through to Q2. There we go, 11th. That is going to get us through to Q2. So hopefully, moving on to Q2, we should be able to, I mean, if we keep that pace, we should be able to get into Q3, and then be in a fighting chance for points. But we haven't moved into Q2 for some reason. And now it says we're just going straight to the race. I mean, at the time, I didn't know what that was, but it turns out it was actually a bug, which if you retired from Q1 or Q2, sometimes it would just think that you've retired from qualifying entirely, send you to the back of the grid, and send you straight to the race. So that is what has happened here.
Home to what we all hope is going to be a thrilling Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. So let's take a look at the topographical map of the Jeddah Street Circuit. As you can see, a number of challenging corners for the drivers to master here. We'll see just how much the teams have benefited from their time spent in practice this weekend. And like many street circuits, this track has the potential to punish drivers that get it wrong. Let's hope we avoid any safety cars today. Before we begin, let's take a quick look at the grid lineup for today's race. A fantastic effort from Charles Leclerc yesterday, and it's put him on pole. And Max Verstappen lines up alongside. Looking down the rest of the grid, we have Sainz, Perez, and Sir Lewis Hamilton, and Russell, Fernando Alonso, Bottas, Ocon, and Jenson Button, Magnussen, Norris, Yuki Tsunoda, and Mick Schumacher, Gasly, Joe, Sebastian Vettel, and Alex Albon, Stroll, Latifi, Ricciardo, and Paul. With preparations almost complete, let's head down to the track.
So for strategy, once again, would you believe it, it's medium to hard. So we're going to be doing a one stop as usual. We did have a look at if we might actually go for a hard to medium, because obviously we're starting right at the back, so if we do exactly what everyone else is doing, we're just going to end up stuck basically. So we might as well just try something different and see if that can get us into the points. But the formation lap starts now. We jumped the gun a little bit because we're not used to being so far back, so we start going straight away when we actually have to wait quite a while for the other 21 cars to get a move on. As you can see, we are on the hard, so we have decided to go for the alternate strategy there. Hopefully, like I say, that can get us into the points here. And then we line ourselves up on the grid. Can we get a purple this time? Nope, just green. But like I say, it really doesn't matter because we're right at the back. And it's lights out and away we go. We get a pretty bad start, but that was to be expected given that we are on the harder compound tyre. And we just send it absolutely down the inside of, well, quite a lot of cars. We're up to 18th now if we can stick it around the side of Albon there. And we do, so we've managed to go from 22nd up to 18th as the back end gets a little bit squirrely out there, and that's going to invite Albon as Gasly actually ends up braking a bit early for some reason, and we're able to scoot round the side of him. So up into 17th place now, and we haven't even got halfway round the lap yet, so that's not too bad. And then we've got the Alfa Romeo of Joe Guanyu up ahead, although onto lap 2 he's managed to pull away from our DRS, so ideally by lap 3 we need to be within a second of him, otherwise Gasly is definitely going to get past us because our straight line speed still isn't fantastic, and obviously there's quite a few DRS zones here, so ideally we need to be within that DRS. He seems to be getting held up by the Alfa Romeo Vettel though, so if we're able to just stick with him then maybe we can stay in the DRS. But other than that, I mean 15th place now because it looks like a Red Bull and a Ferrari have ended up having to go in the pitch for some reason. They must have been fighting a bit too hard on that first lap. So yeah, 15th place. As we get told by our engineer that there appears to be an issue. Oh dear. Please don't be a retirement.
It looks critical. Find somewhere to retire as soon as possible.
That's it. The engine is blown up. That is our race over. It's just gone from bad to worse. So we get a bug in the game which sends us right to the back of the grid. And then we make decent progress from 22nd to 15th. But it means absolutely nothing because end of the lap there we just have a retirement and that's it. Looks like Ferrari's won once again. Leclerc. I wonder if the Red Bulls actually managed to get any points this race. They didn't have a great Bahrain. Who's on the podium? There we go. George Russell and Lewis Hamilton on the podium. What has happened to the Red Bulls? Well, Sergio Perez down in 9th after our teammate, who's in 8th, who got us 4 points, which is very, very nice. But Sergio Perez down in 9th with 2 points, which means that Max Verstappen must be all the way down at the bottom there with no point. Anyway, as that race was so short, given our engine failure, we might as well do Australia in the same episode. So we've got a few more days to put in some activities there. So we've got a sponsor event. And then what's the second thing we're going to do? We're going to do a press tour maybe. Yep, that's going to give our driver an extra 200 acclaim. Again, we just don't have the money to do any facility upgrades. And we see here that it's the turbocharger that has failed us, which is very upsetting. Thankfully, it's not the control electronics or the energy store, because that would be even worse because you only get 2 of those. But at least we have 3 turbochargers to be able to use. We've got 2,000 R&D points, so we can definitely do a few upgrades here as we go for a weight reduction upgrade, which seemingly on this car is going to be very, very important. And then also, are we going to do this drag reduction upgrade or not? No, we decide to go for ERS upgrade by the looks of things. So that's going to help us a lot as well, because you could probably tell, but ERS is so bad on this current car. You get about maybe 2 laps of being able to use it to overtake people, and then you just have to try and recharge for another like 10 laps. But we're into the Australian Grand Prix weekend now, and we see that we're going to have to deal with some rain in the race, which is going to be interesting because I haven't driven in the rain in this game yet. Progress-wise, we have moved up, but then so has AlphaTauri and Haas. So in terms of actual positioning, we haven't changed much. We've moved closer to Alpine and Alfa Romeo. But overall, in terms of the order, we're pretty much in the same place. So we expect it to be sort of in the mid of the pack, but definitely not at the top of the mid pack there. So going into Q1, let's see what setup we've got. So 2025 on the wings, which should hopefully give us enough downforce when we're in the wet, but then also enough downforce to actually be able to qualify. Otherwise, we are going to be very, very slow in qualifying, and as we all know, in the wet, it's pretty difficult to overtake. So we kind of do need the slightly higher downforce setup, just so we have good race pace, because I think, for us at least, this race, that's going to be the most important, to make sure we have the faster race pace there. And you can see on our first flying lap for Q1, we're getting a little bit squirrely coming out of the corners there, so the rear end of this car still not quite where we want it to be in terms of stability. And then coming around the final corner here, DRS on, and then across the line, what time do we set? A 1:19.4, which puts us below Ocon and Sainz, but above Ricciardo and Stroll for now. Obviously, everyone else hasn't done their lap yet, so we skip forward a little bit, and we are 13th. So we've done a 1:19.4, like I said, and our teammate Button has done a 1:18.7. So if we want to progress in this session, we are definitely going to have to find some pace, because the AI just gets so much quicker at the end of Q1. Like, generally, almost the entire AI can just gain another second out of nowhere at the end of Q1, so we need to be gaining some time. But here you can see we're about 3 tenths up, and then by the end of the lap we're almost 5 tenths up. We're still 15th anyway, so this should be enough to put us into Q2. I think I saw that put us 10th in the end. Yeah, there we go, 10th with a 1:18.9, and our teammate couldn't improve on his 1:18.7. So we're into Q2, but as you can see, it's pretty tight, so it's going to be pretty difficult to get into Q3. Anyway, into Q2, we've already done one run, and that's given us a 1:18.963, and our teammate's done a 1:18.913, so literally half a tenth between us currently. But our first run did actually give us underbody damage, so we've got to wait another 3 minutes, which means that we'll be trying to go out onto the track with only 2 minutes left, pretty much. So it's going to be touch and go whether we actually manage to get this second lap in. And with 4 seconds to go coming around the final corner, I don't think we're going to make it there, and we don't. So we actually only managed to do our one lap, which was a little bit slower than our Q1 lap, I think, but it still manages to get us 10th. Our teammate improved by a 10th himself, but didn't actually match his Q1 time, strangely enough. Anyway, we only had one set of new softs to be able to use in Q3, because we used 2 in Q1 and 2 in Q2, and you only get 5 in total. So this is the end of our flying lap. What do we get? I think that says P9 on the steering wheel. Yeah, P9. What time did we get? 1:18.7. So we improved by a couple of tenths on our fastest times. Our teammate managed a 1:18.5, so he's definitely got the pace advantage in qualifying. But not bad overall. I mean, we're quicker than literally all the other midfield teams other than Alonso. And then our teammate is faster than Alonso. So overall, team performance-wise, I am pretty pleased. And 7th and 9th should hopefully give us a decent chance at getting even more points.
Lining the track here in Albert Park. It's going to be a fantastic day of racing. Welcome everybody to the Australian Grand Prix. We're a stone's throw from the enormous Port Phillip Bay for today's race at the 3.28-mile Albert Park circuit. It's a bumpy racing surface here, and the 14 corners could prove especially difficult in the wet conditions. So watch out for a safety car at some point during this Grand Prix. We begin, let's take a quick look at the grid lineup for today's race. A fantastic effort from Charles Leclerc yesterday, and it's put him on pole. And the smooth operator Carlos Sainz completes the front row. Looking down the rest of the grid, we have Perez, Verstappen, George Russell and Hamilton, Button, Fernando Alonso, Paul and Pierre Gasly, Norris, Ocon, Kevin Magnussen and Mick Schumacher, Tsunoda, Vettel, Alex Albon and Valtteri Bottas, Ricciardo, Joe, Stroll and Nicholas Latifi. With preparations almost complete, let's head down to the track. It's not going to be plain sailing for our drivers today, although with the sky falling as it is, perhaps sailing isn't too far from the truth. Natalie Pinkham, good to have you with us here today. Your thoughts?
It is a touch damp, isn't it? As a driver, there are 3 big things to worry about when racing in these conditions: standing water, tyre temperature and visibility. Judging distance to the cars around you is really tricky when you're driving through the vast amounts of spray that these wet weather Pirelli tyres kick up.
So we are into the race now. It looks like well, I mean, the strategy says it's wet to wet, which obviously it's not going to be, because halfway through the race it is going to change to dry. So whether we end up going wets to inters to then dries, or just straight from wets to dries, who knows. But once again, we only get a green formation lap start rather than a dry. But it is lights out and away we go. We get a pretty cautious start there. Like I say, I haven't actually driven in the wet at all before this race in this game. So my first experience of driving in the wet in this game is on the full wets in Australia in the My Team car. So it's certainly going to be interesting, but going off the first corner there, we actually don't lose any position, so we are still in ninth, and our teammate, by the looks of it, is side by side with Lewis Hamilton, and as I say, we don't lose any positions. Pierre Gasly does manage to get round the side of us. So we are down into 10th already, as our teammate is very much fighting Lewis Hamilton there, as he gets very, very squirrely off the exit of that corner, and that allows Hamilton to just stick it down the inside. But as we know, and as we saw from Bahrain, Button is not one to give up a place very easily, so he is going to fight this as much as he can, and still side by side. But at some point Hamilton realises he's going to have to back out there. And then moving on to lap 2, we see there is a yellow flag and Norris falling all the way to the back. So, oh, and the safety car is out. The safety car is out, the first safety car of our career. Wonder what happened with Norris. We see a replay. He just goes around the corner there, following ourselves. Just smashes it into the wall, and also takes out Magnussen and Ocon at the same time. So he's caused a bit of carnage there. So are any of them actually out of the race? It still says there are 22 cars running. So I think they all managed to stay in the race, but they definitely had damage. There is no doubt about that. As we asked the weather report, and he says the Inters are the best tyre for now. That's not very helpful. I wanted to know when we're going to be going on to the dries, not the fact that Inters are apparently the best tyre, even though we're on wets. But I doubt anyone is going to be going into the pits for that. On to lap 5, we are still in 10th, in between both AlphaTauris here, so we are sticking on to the back of Gasly reasonably well. But Tsunoda is definitely going to be trying to go for a move when he can get close enough, as he does here. We block him off on the outside there, perhaps a little bit late on the move, but using all the ERS we possibly can to stay ahead, because I think if we didn't, he would have easily scooted around the side of us. And then on to the end of lap 5, Leclerc gets the fastest lap as expected, and Hamilton is into the pits. Not sure why. I'm guessing he got damage at some point, but that basically gifts us another position. So we're back up into P9 where we started. As you see on lap 6, the first guys are coming in for Inters. So that is Vettel in for Inters. And then a little bit further back, I think Lewis Hamilton is coming back into the pits. So he put Inters on the lap before, and then literally the next lap, as everyone else is coming in for Inters, he comes in for wets. So I don't know if Mercedes think they've got some sort of master plan here, but doing it completely different to everyone else, as our engineer tells us that it's time to go in for tyres, and I think the way we're driving there definitely proves it. These wets are getting very, very difficult to control. We are sliding all over the shop, and that almost allows Tsunoda to go past us as we go for the defensive move, and I think that seems to shock Tsunoda a little bit, because he almost sends himself into the wall. But then on that corner we go into the gravel, so you can see just how tricky these tyres are becoming now. Even Ricciardo's thinking he might be able to get into some of this action. And then for some reason we decide, even though we're sliding literally all over the place, that in fact it is not time to come in for new tyres, and we stay out. I think our thinking was that it was going to dry up quicker than I thought it would, and we would just be able to stay out for dries. But then eventually our engineer does tell us that there's only 10 minutes, well, that there is 10 minutes more of rain, and I definitely can't stay on these wets for another 10 minutes. So I think at the end of this lap we do decide that we are going to have to come in for some Inters. Otherwise we are literally going to be a sitting duck all the way until it is dry time. And honestly, I don't think we would make up enough time by doing one less pit stop. Anyway, we do the turn in here and we get purple. but it's slightly slower stop because it turns out our teammate also decided lap 8 was the time to come out for Inters. But we've got them on in just over 2 seconds there. Where do we come out? 18th by the looks of it. So Bottas is ahead of us and so is Ricciardo. So just staying out 1 lap extra has already caused us some issues there. As Esteban Ocon sets the fastest lap of this race on his Inters. On lap 9 you can see Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez are getting pretty feisty with each other. Side by side there. Who is going to win out on this battle? Neither of them particularly like backing out of these situations. But it looks like Perez has managed to keep the position there from Max Verstappen. As Esteban Ocon sets yet another fastest lap. So that is one Alpine that is absolutely flying on these new Inters. You'd have thought that, you know, the Ferrari or the Mercedes would be setting the fastest laps on their Inters, but clearly not. Oh, there we go. As Hamilton sets the fastest lap. But he's really far back. Like I said, he for some reason went in for Inters, then wets, and then Inters again. So, very strange strategy there. But we do manage to stay ahead of Tsunoda. So he's like 2 seconds back, but that's because he decided lap 10 instead of lap 8 was the time to come in for Inters. So maybe he was trying to do the whole stay out on wets until it's dry. But clearly I think it's showing that method is not going to work. But it does mean that we're still only 15th. So there must be a few people that haven't pit. Alex Albon being one of them as we move up into 14th. But it's 3 wide up ahead of us. What is going on here? We've got Vettel, Ricciardo and Bottas all fighting each other. I'm guessing one of them must have just come out the pit. Vettel maybe, because, yeah, that's weird. As we absolutely send it down the inside of Bottas and Ricciardo. I will say, when I actually did that, I did not mean to go past Ricciardo. I just ended up braking a bit too late. I was going to try and send it down the inside of Bottas, but Ricciardo was so slow, he ended up going past him as well. So up into 12th. And we are currently stuck behind Vettel, who is stuck behind Norris, who is on the wets. So that's why we are so slow here. As Vettel sends it down the inside, does he get past? We think about trying to go and follow him through, but we didn't quite have the power there. As we go a little bit later on the brakes than Norris, can we get it turned? Just about, and we are up into 11th. So we've got Vettel ahead of us, and then Gasly ahead of us in 9th. So if we can get past Vettel, we'll pretty much be where we were before all of the pit stops. Although I'm pretty sure we were 9th, so somebody is still ahead of us. Maybe that Ferrari who's into the pits. Who's that Sainz? He's into the pits now. I'm guessing he must have stayed out for wets or something. I don't know. How's he ended up falling so far back? But anyway, that puts us into 10th, so we're back into the points. I think we should be able to get past Vettel. He's in a Aston Martin, and we know that Aston Martin is not very quick. As there is a yellow flag and a car that looks very much like ours on the minimap is going very slowly. And there he is. That is our teammate Jenson Button out of this session. So we DNF in the last race and then he DNFs in this race. Which is a shame because he was in some pretty decent point scoring position. Hopefully it means that we won't DNF because the last thing we need is 2 DNFs in a row. But him DNFing does mean that we are now up into 8th. So we do get a little bit more points to the board as we are very, very close to Vettel. Are we going to send it down the inside? Yes, we do. Oh my god. We just somehow managed to not lock up there. Because we really sent it quite late there. But Vettel gave us the room. Props to him. And we are up into 7th. So we've got Gasly in our sights once again, as DRS is now enabled. Now normally that means that it is the time to come in for dries, especially in the previous games whenever DRS was enabled, that was pretty much always the cue that it is now dry enough, it is the crossover point to come in for some dries. Now there are 9 laps left, we could probably get away with going on to softs, but as we're in 7th, which is a pretty decent point scoring position, I decided I didn't really want to risk it and end up at the end of the race with some very, very worn tyres. So we go on to the mediums there, we get an optimal turn in once again, and our team manage a 2.4 second stop, so couldn't really ask for more there. And we come out in 14th place, going very deep into turn 1. Once again, our tyres have obviously come out at 70 degrees, and when it's a wet track, it's going to take quite a long time to get these heated up to optimum working temperature, I think. So that's going to allow Vettel to probably come quite close to us. Yeah, as you see end of lap 21 there. Charles Leclerc is out of this session. So it was the Red Bulls that had the issues in the first and second race, but it looks like Sainz, who's in the pits behind us now, has the issue, and Leclerc is out of this race as Magnussen comes out of the pits, but obviously he has got pretty cold tyres, so we're able to just have that little bit better traction and send it around the inside of him there. I was worried he was going to go for a dive bomb there, but he didn't. This year's AI, you'd never know when they're just going to go for the world's biggest dive bomb. It's a yellow flag, so we can't try and go around Ricciardo, although we didn't have the pace to do so anyway. It does mean we're up into 7th place again, so we haven't lost any positions, but Ricciardo has managed to jump us throughout this whole pit stop thing. But we send it down the inside, get late on the brakes, and we are up into 6th place. As there is another yellow flag, that looks like a Haas has sent it into the gravel. As he tries to go around the outside of Ricciardo we're fighting, and just ends up just going into the gravel. So that is that Haas probably out of the points, I'd imagine here. But onto lap 23 here, Ricciardo is still sticking with us. He is within our DRS range, so we definitely need to be careful not to make any mistakes like that. Getting onto the grass there, that is not going to help our cause. But Gasly is definitely way too far in front of us. So is Alonso. I mean, Gasly 6 seconds, Alonso 12 seconds. I doubt in the last 5 or 6 laps that we are going to get anywhere close to them. The goal here is to keep Ricciardo behind us, which we have done, and he's just fallen pretty far back, because that is what he did. He just took a bit too much speed through there and sent it into the wall. So he's gone into the pits, and from him being very slow, that has allowed us to build a pretty decent gap to the guys behind us. So just under 3 seconds to Bottas now. And then at the end of lap 29, Max Verstappen wins this race with both Ferraris pretty much out of contention. And we cross the line in P6.
And that's the end of the race. We'll see you in Parc Fermé.
Another superb Australian Grand Prix comes to an end then, and it's a thoroughly deserved victory.
So overall, a pretty good race for us, moving from 9th to 6th within the race. So that's another 8 points for our team. It's very unfortunate that our teammate wasn't able to complete the race, because he was ahead of us. So I think he would have got some very nice points for us. Max Verstappen finally gets some points on the board after DNFing from pretty much every race so far. But yeah, as we see there, Jenson Button and Charles Leclerc both out of this race. Standings wise, it actually means that George Russell is currently leading the World Championship. Definitely not something I thought I would be saying, but he leads the championship by Leclerc by 5 points. I suspect he's not going to have that for very long, because the Ferrari in this game is just overpowered. But Button has 14 points. We move ourselves up with 12 points. But yeah, pretty decent race for us there, much better than Jeddah. Some more points on the board for us. Hopefully we can continue this momentum into the next race, which is Imola, which also has a sprint race, so that should be fun. So make sure to be subscribed to see that in hopefully a few days' time.